So, where was my last talk about TypoScript? TypoScript best practices. That sounds like a good one. Actually, this year at InspiringCon. Ha, it's even in UCI. Awesome. Okay, I think that is something we can start with, but that's probably too advanced for the start. So that's one we'll get started with. Just need to fetch the right presentations, and then we can go ahead. I think that was not one of these. Oh. Content strategy, localization, TypoScript. That is probably, that's a good one. Okay. So probably for the basics, it makes sense. It's still the old CI, so bear with me. Right. So the basic idea about, let's 1 second. So I'll just do it this way. Flop. I'm almost ready. I've never been at a DevCamp before, by the way, so it's all new for me. Okay, right. So basically, as you know, I mean, Fusion, as it is called now, is built from TypoScript, or has its origins in TypoScript in Type 3 CMS. And what we've done back then was looking at, okay, what is, where is it used in the old system, and where is it actually good at? And we figured out that in the old, or in Type 3 CMS, TypoScript is used for many things, for permissions, for backend behavior, for page rendering, for plugins and extensions. And what we figured is that actually the thing where TypoScript Fusion, I really have to watch out, is good at, is actually page rendering. So that means we try to strip it down to the core of it. That means in Neos, we only use it to configure rendering. So if you think of a classical MVC stack with model view controller, it's basically, it fits into the view in MVC. So it takes some data and this is getting rendered. And basically, so the general idea is we have on the one side, we have some data to be shown. So for instance, a page we want to render. And on the other side, we have a templating engine like Fluid, which allows you to configure how the markup should look like. And basically, TypoScript is the glue in between. That's the general idea. So that means, just to illustrate that, when the whole page should be rendered, TypoScript is triggered. TypoScript in turn figures out which Fluid template to render, the page template basically, right? And then certain parts of the page templates, there are placeholders in there for menu, for, you're just getting a call, by the way. for menu, for the actual content of the site, of the web page. And if that happens, the Fluid templates call back to TypoScript and say, please render me the menu. And then TypoScript does its magic and again triggers, for instance, the menu rendering. And when that is done, the result is returned to TypoScript. The whole way is going back, the replacement happens, and at the end, you get the result. So if you think about that, it looks like, oh, that's totally complex. Why do we actually need to do that, right? So why do we need all this work? And the main reason is actually that extensibility is implemented by TypoScript. So that means we've looked at lots of systems and tried to understand how extensibility works, and we didn't find any good solution to that. So that means we build our own. So that's like the idea. So that means if you have a website like this, and this is rendered, I'll just check on the screen. Oops, like that. Right. If you take a website like that, which is the old demo site, and this is rendered, you see all the different elements basically, right? So which are parts which are rendered. And this means this, the basic principle behind TypoScript is the divide and conquer principle. We have a very hard problem, you know, rendering a big website can be very hard, containing lots of different parts. And what we do is we try to divide the problem smaller and smaller and smaller until we only have to render a single text element or a single headline, which in turn is really easy. So that means rendering a single element is quite easy, a quite easy job, right? But rendering a whole website is very hard. So that means we subdivide the big problem into smaller and smaller, smaller parts.
You need to fix it over.
Huh?
You need to fix it over.
Yeah, I said it's a very old presentation. Right. Okay, so that's the basic idea about it. How does it look like? So there are basically a few principles, but I think we got along these. So just that you get a feeling how it looks like. If you know TypoScript in Typo 3, then Fusion should look pretty common in some sense. So we have this instantiation that look the same. So in Typo 3 CMS, that would be all uppercase. It would be page all in upper letters, for instance. The data types are just existing. Prototypes is a new concept. We'll come to that in a bit. That somehow fits to lib.something in Typo 3 CMS. And processors roughly correspond to standard rep, just as a rough, well, lookalike, so to speak. Right. So let's look at some TypoScript and look at some Fusion, and see how the ping pong works. So on the right side we see the Fusion code. On the left side we see the template. So we instantiate the whole rendering with page equals page, and the rendering starts at the page TypoScript object always. And the page body is a template, so you have to specify the template path. So we specify basically which template, which fluid template should be used. And inside the fluid template, we can use, for instance, sections. So we have the body section in here, and with the section name equals body, we reference exactly this part of the template, which is marked here. Inside this template, at some point, we have these parts main menu, and ignore the rest, ignore that F format raw for now, it doesn't matter that much. But this parts of main menu references a path in Fusion. So that means it references parts.menu, so it references this menu object we see here in TypoScript. And this in turn triggers the rendering of the menu. And it's basically the same for content, right? So content main references this primary content TypoScript Fusion object, which renders the main content of the website. Just a side note: this format raw is needed because Fluid escapes all output by default to prevent you from cross-site scripting attacks. However, in this case, it's fine to just output the HTML, right? Because this is done by Fusion. So the HTML is generated by Fusion, so it's safe to just output it as it is, because it can contain, of course, user-generated content in smaller templates, but then it's already escaped. So that's why. If you ignore that, if you forget that, then you just get the HTML output on the website. So it's pretty easy to spot this error. Right, so is that somehow clear what's happening here? If you're nodding, not nodding, then I would like, because, okay. Just because then, if not, then ask questions, right? That would be the first step, I think, to do that.
The parts menu and the parts main menu, isn't that the wrong name?
Ah, you're totally right. Actually, true. This thing has an error, so right, this must be parts main menu. You're right, yeah. That wouldn't render.
I'm sorry, this is an old slide of mine that I never fixed.
No, it was just...
And I didn't see it either. So basically, the idea is don't be afraid of all that. But it helps. So Fusion is comprised of just a few inner working of a few building blocks, and it makes sense to understand them to get a feeling of how they work together. So that's why we'll look at these now. The first concept you need to know is the concept of a context. The context renders or contains the data which should be rendered, and that's pretty much it. So that means if we render a whole page, then the context contains the page node, right? We have the node structure from the content repository, which is basically a tree of all the content we wanna render, and this is in the context. So this is where where Fusion pulls the data out which should be rendered. That means, and this context can change. So if we take this website, which we've seen already, right on the top, the context is the whole features page we've seen. So it contains the whole features page because that is what is being rendered. And then when we want to render, for instance, the headline in here, then actually the context changes towards features, teaser, text 1. So it changes to the currently rendered node. After this, it again is features. So it's basically for every element, the context changes, and after the element is rendered, it flips back to the old state, basically. And it's the same here, right? So we come at that point, then we switch the context. Now we want to render the column 1, then we render this one, then we want to render the headline, then the text, and it just happens one after the other. And after that is all done, we again have the whole page, the features page in the context. And maybe for some of you who've studied computer science, the context has a very important property which is called side effect freeness, which means that exactly what I just described, right? So when I change something, the context always changes back to the old value after rendering is complete. And this allows us very many things in Fusion. It allows us extremely efficient caching, for instance. It allows us to render single elements of the whole website, which we call out-of-band rendering. So that means, imagine you have a big website and you have some tab navigation somewhere or some tabs on the website, and you would like to, if you switch the tab, you would like via an AJAX request load the content, right, from this single tab and then put it in there. And we can guarantee that the content looks exactly as if it was rendered in the whole page, basically. So that is the main property of out-of-band rendering, and that's extremely nice, as I said, for caching. So that's how we built the internal caching mechanism. But it can be also used for very advanced caching using varnish, for instance. Yeah, so that's quite an important property. Right. So that was the context. Context contains what it should be rendered. Second property is we have these TypoScript prototypes. So that means TypoScript is a prototype-based language. Who knows JavaScript? Okay, quite some. JavaScript prototypes somehow? Yeah, okay, right. Basically, it's exactly the same thing as JavaScript prototypes. So that means it's like in PHP an inheritance in some sense. So that means this first line basically says class slideshow extends content, if I would write it in PHP. And this one is the instantiation, so this would write my slideshow equals new slideshow as an example. So that's just basically really what this says. And inside the prototypes, you can define any properties. So that means slideshow now has this process rep defined, for instance. And actually, we are not just prototype based, but we are what we call pre-prototype based. That's something like of a special functionality, which means often you have the use case that you would like. For instance, you say your images should be at most 600 pixels right on your website, right? But if you want to place them in a 2-column element, you would like to say, okay, now of course they cannot be wider than 300 pixels because otherwise it will break your layout, for instance. And this is actually pretty hard to write in many other systems, and especially because the 2-column can contain the image directly, but it can contain other elements inside which then contain the 2-column, so it can be arbitrarily nested, basically, the content structure. And with Fusion, it's actually quite easy to write. So we can say something like prototype image, set the maximum width, so that sets the maximum width for all the images on the site. And then we can say we set the maximum width for all images which are inside a 2-column element. So that basically so it's like saying, if I'm in a 2-column and then I'm in an image, then set the maximum width to some certain value. And this allows you to very selectively override parts of the rendering depending on your context, depending on where you are currently. And it doesn't matter what is in here in between. So that's a quite powerful feature which is in there.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I never had the issue, but how would let's say I define for a prototype 2-column prototype image like this, but then I also define prototype whatever 1-column prototype image and then 1-column layout in which I have a 2-column layout in which I have an image.
Yeah, so there are some overriding rules. So basically, it means that the innermost wins basically. So that means, you know, if you have a 1-column and then you have a 2-column and then you have an image, then it will be the 2-column image fitting because 2-column is inside the other one.
Right.
So it's basically looking from inside out. Yeah. But I mean, that's like a really, really edge case which you possibly won't hit. I never had that issue in practice yet, I think, but yeah, it could happen. Yeah.
But it's, I mean, if thinking-wise, it's pretty straightforward because if you look at this code, you have prototype 2-column, prototype image. So as soon as we hit a 2-column prototype, we override the prototype for the image to have the new maximum width. And if there's nothing new inside, that will be the prototype image at that point. So if you have something for 1-column and then the 2-column, then first the override for 1-column will happen and then the override for 2-column will happen. So it's pretty easy to see that the inner wins all the time.
So the second concept is really the prototypes we've just seen. And that it's tree prototype is a nice addition, but don't think too much about it. It's just important that it's like class-based. So you define your prototype somewhere and at some point you start to render them. That's just a basic concept. And lastly, we have Eel and flow query. And basically you can roughly say Eel is like JavaScript, flow query is like jQuery. So that means Eel is basically an implementation of a syntax which is like JavaScript, which is like a single line of JavaScript, so without any so just a single statement, so to speak. And flow query is implementing something like jQuery, so in a traversal language where you can filter, search for things, go up and down in the tree, these kind of things. And Eel is always used when you come across these dollar curly brace something notation here, right? So that means, so this is an Eel expression because it's dollar curly brace and ends with curly brace. And inside, everything which starts with the Q is then just like the jQuery, like the dollar function. It basically means query the node and then access a certain property. So this Q node property title is actually flow query. Just to give you an example, what you can do with Eel, you can do something like string concatenation. Just as in JavaScript, we have a JavaScript library which can do we have a library which can do quite some advanced things. So for instance, let's say so that's a real use case. We have a 2-column element. On the column, on the top level element, you can say if it's evenly spaced, so 50-50% or 1/3, 2/3, for instance. And what happens is that the column layout gets a value like 3366, for instance. So for the how it should be spaced. Then we have an iterator index which says, am I currently rendering the first column and am I rendering the second? And what I need, for instance, in Bootstrap is something like classes like span4 or span8. I think it's an old version of Bootstrap. It has changed probably, but like you get the idea. So what we do here is we split the column layout string by the dash. So we get 33 and 66. And then we access either the first one or the second one, depending on the iterator index, so giving us just the 33 or the 66. Then we divide it by 100, multiply it by 12, and round the whole thing, and this way we get span 4 and span 8. So basically that means it is quite powerful to transform or to express rendering rules, so to speak. And the cool thing is that this single line helps you to adjust your framework towards, in this case, an old version of Bootstrap. And this can be, you don't have to do that in your code. Basically, this could be done by a generic Bootstrap package, for instance, or a generic foundation package, which does these rules once, and then it would just work for you. So that is something which is quite nice. You can also do the ternary operator, which you know from JavaScript or PHP. So an if-else condition, basically, if the index is null, we add class first, else we don't add anything. We have helpers there, which are just functions, substrings, cropping, rounding, getting config, formatting dates, reversing arrays, and quite some more. And for flow query, it's basically we try to resemble jQuery as much as possible. So that means we have a closest operation. So flow query always operates on a node tree. So right, in Neos we have the big tree of content nodes. And we start at some node, and then we can, for instance, with closest, we go up the hierarchy until we find a website part node. So that's the node type in here. And then we access the title of it, for instance. We can also go down with the children operation. We go down, and this is what we filter. So getting all the children, which are text. We also have something like so we can start with node, which is the current node. We can also start with site. That is the root, basically, of your website. So that's how you can do a global finding. This finds all texts you have on your website. If you have a huge website, that's probably slow, but and there are other ways to do that. But if you're in a certain context, it can be quite helpful. And you can even access the current requests if you want to do some things. Right. So as I said, you can go down. You can find things. You can get the first child. You can get all the parents. Count them. Check if the current node is a page. You can check if the title starts with welcome. You can start with the title if the title starts with welcome or the description starts with welcome. So that's basically pretty much like it is in jQuery. Right. And that's actually it. So just to reconstruct, basically what we had so far is we have the context, we have TypoScript Fusion prototypes, we have Eel and flow query, and that is it. I think that would be a good point to ask questions now regarding the basics and then discuss how we want to continue. Any questions, comments? Did that totally overflow you, or was it somehow understandable, or?
So probably real-world examples.
Yeah, right.
Caching, we should tackle caching.
Yeah, caching is something we would move a little to the back, I think. Yeah, I think let's go to the real world I think that is useful. In Neos, we just take the Neos demo site, and there the TypoScript resides and resources private TypoScript, and there it is.
Oh, actually, sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
This traversal flow query where I want to filter this third one from the bottom.
This one? Mm-hmm.
If I want to have some kind of OR.
Yeah, the OR.
I can combine the instance of have a comma and another one.
Yeah.
Then I realize that they get reordered. So I first get all ones from the first type and then
Okay, yeah, that might actually be. But I would say that's an implementation bug then.
Okay.
So that's something we should fix.
So, but that would be the correct way to have two brackets.
I would say, yeah.
There's no syntax like type or instance
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, but so the syntax is correct, but then the implementation is wrong at that point, and should be fixed. Yeah. But it's interesting because actually what happens if you do a children with this query, then actually it gets all the children, iterates over them, and checks if the query matches on each of them. So actually it shouldn't reorder at any case. So, but
I think we split the filter expressions and apply them one by one.
okay, then we need to change that. Yeah, that might be, yeah, true. That was already open. Right. So, some specific examples. Johannes, do you have anything particular in mind what is useful to show, probably? I'm always...
For caching, the menu is always good.
Yeah, but
just show some prototypes.
yeah, and just, what do we use as an example? I need some...
Maybe, first of all, the page prototype.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Because most people think,
yeah.
to show the difference that there are the sections in it, stuff between the sections is...
Do you have something in mind? Because do you want to just take over for a few minutes, or we can do it together? I mean, I don't mind. Just
can you open the HTML file, the layout?
Yeah, sure. So page.
You Because this will be mostly the first entry point where you get in touch with TypoScript if you want to change the menu or something.
Yeah.
And this is the default layout, the default template we have. And what you see is the default template has a fully HTML structure, including an HTML tag, but the tag really isn't get rendered at all.
Yeah, so I can do something like foo here, and if I go to the front end, and I check the source code, and nothing is there.
Exactly. Because we just did it, so you have a better overview of the template. Important part is always the section stack. Everything between the sections are rendered because the sections below us to run TypoScript path we saw earlier.
Right. So that means this.
Not fluid, not
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's important is that the stuff in between there won't get rendered, but it's not rendered.
Yeah.
Just from better overview, so you see the layout.
And it also helps that you can open the file just in a normal, well, in some sense at least, open it in a normal browser and then get a rough understanding how the layout looks like. You know that you don't need to. That's the main reason why we do that. So
if you'd like to add a class to the body tag, for example, this won't be the right place to do it.
Yeah, you need to do it in in Fusion.
Exactly. Then you page prototype.
Yeah. So exactly. So the idea is just to
get the entry point.
It doesn't have CSS loaded currently, so. Right, so the page prototype, which one do you need? This one? Show it how it looks like, or?
Yeah.
Okay, right, so one way to, in the node types, Neos you mean, right? Okay, so what is very important, it is very useful to look inside the Neos TypoScript code, the Neos Fusion code to understand how things work. We have documentation and we always strive to improve that, that's for sure. But actually, Fusion is built on itself, basically. So very many things you see here are actually implemented in Neos itself, and you can see how it works internally. So that means, that's what I'll show you. So we are in Neos. And then there are two packages which are relevant, which are Neos and Neos node types. Neos is basically the core system, and Neos node types is the convenience node types, like so the renderings for the definition that renderings for convenience node types like text and images and these kind of things. In Neos is really the core business, so you can't so you can remove this package and start from scratch. That's what Dominic is showing currently, I think. Oh no! Oh,
second slide.
Oh, okay. So he will show that basically how to build up this part then in the second slide. And there again we are in resources, private Fusion, and then we have we include everything basically. We include all the prototypes in here. Basically, if you have PHP Storm, you can just open files. So that's what I use all the time. And if I want to use the page, then I use just page.ts2, and this way you'll just find the right file. So what you see here in Neos page inherits from HTTP message. So that's an internal prototype object we use, which corresponds to the whole response of rendering, basically. And there you see the definition of, and actually the HTTP message, if you look at that, it's actually an array internally. So that means all the elements which are in here are rendered one by one after each other, all the sub-elements. And this way the doc type is rendered, this way the opening HTML tag is rendered, this way the header comment is rendered, the head tag, the head itself, the body tag, the body itself, and that's, I think, the part where it gets interesting, right? So that means if we use this single line in our template, we get all the standard Fusion from the system itself, and then we start to fill in the blanks, basically. So that means page.body is of type template, right? Because it's defined in Neos itself, it's defined as type template, but here it doesn't specify any template path, right? Because we don't know where your templates reside, of course. And and that's what you define in your custom template. You say, oh yeah, the template path is my default template, for instance. So that's how it fits together. So that's just important to understand how things fit together. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is important. So basically on the first level, each path which will get rendered will be rendered one by one. This is really important. So if you, for instance, you'd like to add something in the head block.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Style sheets or metadata, this is a common case where people want to.
Right. So let's understand that. So head. So if you're like, oh, what can I do with head? Then you need to know the type of head, right? You need to know if it's an array or what kind of Fusion object it actually is. And you see that in the default page template. There you see head equals array. So that is instantiation. It says that the head is new array, right? And that gives you the information which you need. That's what we have also the reference for. So on neos.io, Neos read the docs. There we have references for TypoScript objects, and there also we have typo3 TypoScript array, and this basically explains how the array system works. So that's like the full detail if you want to know that at some point, right? So the steps are basically, you need to, if you want to know what you can do at some point, you need to figure out what type this thing is, which you find in the prototype of the parent if needed, and then you can check that out in the documentation. So that means if I want to add something, I can just do my new head equals my text. I don't know. Probably I'll just let's see that if that works. Few source. Yeah, my text, here it is. And that's, by the way, a very important property. In Fusions, there are three kinds of value. There are simple values, like strings. There are EEL expressions, which are like this. So this is functionally exactly the same, right? Because it's just wrapping the string with an EEL expression. So it's just the same thing. But in the first thing, you cannot do anything, right? But in the second, you can. Here you can start modifying things, concatenate things together,
things from the context,
call PHP functions, whatever you want. And the third option is to call a TypoScript object. So you could also do value, for instance. So the value object, the value TypoScript object doesn't do anything except passing in what is in value. So I can again do this. So that is functionally all the same, right? But it means that as long as you want a static string, you can use the first way. If you need some logic, you can use the second one. If you want more logic, you can use TypoScript objects in the full power, or Fusion objects in the full power. And the cool thing is that works everywhere. So meaning, if I, let's say I want to make the body template path adjustable based on, that's probably a good idea. Maybe we say we want to hide the menu when we are 2 levels down. I don't know, just pretty arbitrary thing, right? So we see the menu is parts.main menu. Or we want to switch the template path in the menu. We want to say the menu should be rendered differently starting from the second level, something like that, right? So currently it's just a static string. What we could also do is we could use an EEL expression. Nothing should change. I just reload. Nothing changed. If I mistype something, I should get an error, right? Because it doesn't find the file. So that's also what I often do, is just to see if my changes are really applied, just to be sure. And now I can start programming. I can actually start something like node, the current node, dot parents dot count, for instance. If this is greater than, I don't know, 3, then I want to show the first. Sorry?
You want to start from the node?
He wants to know
It's
if the
information,
parents.
Yeah, exactly. I basically want to know, this is the document node, exactly, right? Because we're in the context of rendering the whole page, currently. And that means we want to see how far it is in the root line, so how many pages are above, essentially, right? This is what this gives us. And if this is greater than 3, for instance, then we want to switch, we take the first template, and otherwise we take another one, I'll just say main menu 2. And now it renders main menu 2 for the shortcuts page. We'll replace that in a bit. And on the top level, oops. Actually, it might be, we have a few nodes, we have a few standard nodes. We have the top level of the, so I think it's like 2 or 3 levels. I hope it now works. New node parents count. Why does it always render? Oh, actually, wrong direction. So that's the start page. Shortcuts. Sorry, okay. I think exactly, I did the condition wrongly, right? So now it fits. So basically it says if we have less than 1 parent, then we are like on the root. You can also say we have, yeah, actually it makes sense. We have no parent that is only available on the start page, and if we go some level down, we get an exception, right? Because we want to.
That can be had easier if you say node equals site.
Exactly. Yeah, true. Yeah, true. So we can do arbitrary conditions here, but I just want to complete the example. Templates, TypoScript objects, main menu it's 2, and now we just I don't just put a full fat H1 here so that we see it. So right, so that is now basically adjusted in the template. Yep.
Is there like a nice way to get to see the tree in front?
Yeah, actually, that's still an issue. Currently not. I'm afraid. So we have some ideas and
There's a package.
There's a package which works already.
Yeah, it does.
Cool. Christian, do you want to say something about that?
No, I need to install and try it again. But it's in my
Kitsunet, right?
It should be in the Flowpack TypoScript browser.
Okay. There's a package for it.
It should work.
Highly experimental.
Let's try that.
Highly experimental and I think very works.
I'll need to white. Composer install. I never tried it, so that's good. Whoop. Also composer require. Yeah.
I'm not even sure if I registered it already.
So when I clone it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No. But oops. SSH, please.
It should do the trick.
Flowpack dot. So where is it? Namespace wise.
TypoScript.
Flowpack TypoScript dot browser. Yeah. So no.
I don't know if you get an application package and random plugin package.
Yeah, right. So good question. So inside, so just the file structure inside packages is basically we have application framework libraries, Neos, plugin sites currently, right?
Neos only.
Yeah, with some details, exactly. Basically, the structure doesn't matter. So meaning you can create arbitrary folders in here, they are just ignored. So this one level is basically ignored, with one exception, which is libraries. Libraries contains everything which is non-flow framework code. So every external library we use, like Doctrine and so on, this ends up in that package. But besides that, it basically doesn't matter. For us, internally, the convention basically is framework is flow. So everything related to flow. Then, depending on how you install Neos, it either ends up as a separate folder here, or it ends up in application and individual things. And sites is the site itself, the site package, just as a convention. And plugin is usually when you have a front-end plugin. That's how I usually do it. So you have in the front-end some interactive part you want to program. And application for me is usually where I do my basically all the other packages. So I wouldn't touch framework because framework is really the core system. But you know, you could also create a new folder, Sandstorm packages, for instance, or if that makes sense for you. So there's no. Yeah.
You can even, use Composer for that. If you look at the Composer JSONs of your packages, you will find the created ones that we create for you with the Kickstarter. They usually have something like either, if it's an old one, typo3-flow-something, or Neos-something. And for a site package, you will find -site, so Neos-site or typo3-flow-site. Those will end up in the packages sites folder. You can do any postfix there. So you could say my packages type Neos-my company name, and it will end up in packages my company name if you install it via Composer.
Yeah, so that's basically exactly the type what you say what in the Composer JSON. Right, so I installed the package, and now we have TypoScript browser in here.
Yeah. It's, as I said, it's not cool, it's not really good style, but you can follow up page,
body, content, teaser. Is it okay? It shows the TypoScript tree essentially, how to merge tree. So okay, so basically that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing if you want to know. But why don't I see the type of head?
That's a good question.
Okay, it should show the merge tree. Okay, so but
that's not a bug; it's a feature.
Makes it cleaner.
It's good to see which is really applied if you're going to start overwriting prototypes.
Yeah. Actually, I think it doesn't merge the prototype, so it doesn't show you Neo's page here. It's probably missing features of somebody that's time. So that's what you find in the prototypes here. There you can look at TypoScript Neo's page. What is that again? Look, TypoScript Neo's groups. There it is, page. I should review page. And there is the definition we've just seen with the head tag, the head, the body, and so on. So that's what we've just seen in the source code, basically. But it makes probably sense to have another mode where you can get the merged version together. Feature request, if anybody is interested. You can open the pull request. So, right, where were we? We were playing around a little with TypoScript. And there's one thing which I would really like to show, because a lot of which is the case statement.
What we should just talk about what people tackle with in the first time is always in the layout. How is it run in your layout? This is something people look for. Then the if statement, the case statement, and caching.
Yeah, true, good points. Okay, cool. So I'll just start with the case because we are roughly in this area.
It's a question anyone started with TypoScript and has something to
because
also when you started everything or
so we can adjust to your needs.
So basically what you should take with is the concept of TypoScript, how the tree is rendered at all, or how the prototypes are working together. There are prototypes which will be reused as soon as you instate the prototype.
Yeah. Okay. So that means the we have the right. So we have case statement. We have this if statement. But now imagine you have a third case on that, right? You say, oh well, if the level is 0, you want to do the one thing. If it's 1, you want to do the other. If it's 5, you want to do the third thing. And imagine that gets really messy to write and to check, right? The line gets really long and really ugly. And that's probably the case where you would like to introduce the case statement. So the case TypoScript object is basically just like a switch. It's a big switch statement like in PHP. So you say, and inside it, you can, let's just comment that out. Inside you can, you have the different parts of the case, and you give them some names like homepage, for instance, and every element has a condition and a value.
No, a condition or a renderer or a render type or a render path.
One element. Right, that's what I want to show. So that means that means you can now write in a condition here. You can say, if we are on the top level, then the element value should be this string, right? So I'm just rebuilding what we just did. And then you can say something like, and then I have the default case. And there the condition, what's the condition for the default case?
True.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, because we don't have a default condition, I think. And then you say element equals main2. Right, just the 2. So that means what we've just created, I can show you, let's just check if it really works, but it should do the same as we just did. So top level, nothing changed, everything one level down, we have this submenu thing, right? And the idea, this is now extensible. This means you can add case statements wherever you want and however you see them needed. You can even reorder these case statements if you need them. So that is especially important when you have multiple, because for a case it's important in which order they are, because like it's evaluated from top to bottom. But it might happen that at some other point in my system I already defined some of these parts. So if I use TypeScript prototypes, you can split up this configuration if you want that. And for that we have this position attribute here, and this is where you can say position equals 100, that's just a number, and then I can say position equals 50. That means the default is rendered before this one because 50 is smaller than 100. Which means that now we have basically this cool submenu everywhere, right? Because it's just ordered in the wrong direction, so to speak. And this can also do something like start and end, like beginning and end. And you can also do something like before home page, for instance. So you can say this should go before this thing on a specific point in the hierarchy. And this is also what we use internally a lot. So for instance, for the page head, what we've already seen, there we have that a lot, right? We say the character set should be at the start, then comes the title with no specific ordering, and at some point we have some information for the Neos backend which must be included, and this should go very much towards the end, for instance. So that's like how that's an internal tool, but you can also use that for your cases if you want that. Right. So that's the case statement. And the cool thing about the case is this is a planned extension point which you've just created. So we tend to think about extensibility in two general ways. The one is planned and the other is unplanned. And basically every time if there is a planned extension point, that's always a good thing because that is something where you get basically warranty for. So we guarantee as a team that this planned extension point will prevail, that we just won't remove it from one version to another, for instance. While if you use unplanned extensibility, so you just hook into some part of Neos, of course this might change between versions, right? So, and every time where you have a case statement, you have a planned extension point where others could also hook in if you want that, right?
That's it?
Yep.
So the processing of the cases, stop at the first condition that is true, so you don't have anything like that.
No, yeah, the first one matching is output is returned then, yeah, exactly. There's one part where I'm not sure if I'm getting too carried away currently, but there's one part where this is really, really used a lot, which is the rendering of the main content area actually, and the rendering of content collection. So basically we've seen, so there are two main, so actually Neos is built of two main Fusion objects. The one is case and the other is a loop, so a for loop. How is it called, the for loop? The collection. Collection, right. Forgot about it. Thanks. So, and that means, because I think that's quite interesting, and if you understood that, then you understood really how Neos works internally, and that's a very, very useful thing. I hope I don't get carried away too much in that area. So I just would like to show that. So we have because it fits very well to these case statements. So what we do is we have don't look that closely. It's just basically it's just one. I'll just strip that down a little, so that is all basically not really needed. So we do a lot of error handling here to make sure that you get good exceptions and these kind of things. So, but basically it's just this what happens. So if you want to render a content collection, so a collection of elements of the main content area, for instance, then this is done using this part of code. It's the content collection renderer. And this one gets a collection in, which is all the children from the current node, right? And then it iterates over them, and then it calls the item renderer on each of them, which is the content case object, which we'll look at in a bit. And that's basically it. So it's really just a for loop what you see here. Okay? And in the content case object, this looks like this. So that means it's a case object. It just has a default, which always matches. And the type which is being rendered is the name of the node type. So for each iteration, exactly. So this is inside the loop, right? So
sorry, this is one important thing to take away for home, because it's a prototype and will be always the content will be rendered for the current context. And this time, each loop the node is in the connection is the context.
Yeah. So that means, right? We have a. If we go to the, I just would like to demonstrate that in the tree so that you see that. For the home page, you see we have one content. Well, do we have? Yeah, probably I'll just add some content. I mean, we have.
Features text images. Features text images.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. So here we see it a little better, right? So what we have here is we have one content collection main, and it has three sub nodes: text and image, this 3-column block, and then this 2-column block. Okay, so these are the three areas inside there. So what happens is the content collection renderer iterates over these three things we've just seen, right? And then it sets. For every element, it sets the node as in the context as the variable. So it's like a for loop. It's like in PHP you would write something like for each q node children as node. So that's what you would do in. This is basically and then basically like something like content like the content case would start, which says like case, now switch, node, node, get node type, yeah. And then we say something like default is, I can't type PHP anymore, default is return render node, get node type, get name. So meaning the important thing is if you has anybody created his own content element in Neos or an own node type at some point in time? One at least, doesn't matter, just a very simple one, a YouTube element or whatever. Okay, a few. So basically, because what you do then is you always create. You create a node definition here. So you, for instance, say, I think we have a YouTube element in here, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, here, Neos demo YouTube, right? So here we define which properties the node has and these kind of things. And then we define a template and a TypoScript object for that. And the connection between this thing and what is used for rendering is really what we've just seen. So there's no hard-coded part in the core which says, oh yeah, you need to use the content, you need to use the exact same thing or anything, but this is basically one of the main conventions in Neos available, and you can very easily change that if you like. So let's say I don't want to use node.
Or what you can show is not to define another condition for YouTube and then something like
exactly. So for instance, if I would like to change the rendering for YouTube elements. Let's just put one on the. I think I have one on some page, right? The syntax error, yeah. Don't cry. Features, custom elements, right? So here we have a YouTube video available. So what I can do is I can take the normal content case. This is a reopening of the prototype, so it adds additional things to the already existing prototype. So we can do a YouTube special rendering, for instance, and then we could do something like put if the current node node is instance of Neos demo YouTube, and then we can say, well, we don't render Neos demo YouTube as node type as TypeScript object, but we say type equals Neos demo YouTube special. I don't know. Now we probably get an exception because it doesn't find this YouTube special element. So let's define it. Say prototype Neos demo YouTube special without the quotes extends. I don't know. Yeah. Extends template is probably more realistic. Template path equals something like that. Resources, private, YouTube special. I'm just a little lazy currently regarding the files. Private file, YouTube special. So, blah blah. TypeScript Neos template. Yeah, that's right. It's TypeScript. Fusion template. Right. And then we see the special rendering is triggered. And you might wonder why we actually did that, because there's an easier way to do exactly the same thing, which is, just to compare that, which is just reopening the YouTube prototype directly and changing the template path. So you could do also like this, right? We just reopen the Neos demo YouTube element and then define additional rendering. So that's like the exact same thing. So you might wonder, why do I actually need that? Because if I can achieve that in this way, right? The idea is that the top way is much more flexible. So that means you can be very creative in your conditions. So you can do something like, if the element is YouTube and, I don't know, what can I check?
Video IDs.
Yeah, exactly. The video ID is something. Here node property, now we have to check. Yes. So true, you could also do it again in here as we've seen back then. But this is usually useful if you have like if you want to change the rendering completely, very radically at some point, then it is useful. So and we use that a lot as a for instance, let's imagine we have search results of content, and then you usually have a default rendering of an arbitrary search result, and then then you want to say, oh yeah, people, I want a special rendering for search results, and then you would have a content case just for search result, or a case statement just for displaying the search results, and then you could really fine tune and say, oh yeah, if it's a person, then I want to show the image and use this template. If it's so you can really use different elements if you want that. So.
I have a challenge. I want the YouTube special thing to be rendered afternoon.
It's afternoon, yeah.
Including
Including
the caching.
the caching, yeah.
That's a good thing. Good caching example.
That's a good caching example, right?
But it should show caching along.
Yeah.
Right. I would probably adjust it and make it adopt on the URL parameter so we can switch it a little easier.
That's good. One more question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to set up it so in the backend another template? No. For your example, the ID editor wants to set it up in the backend.
You mean, do you want to specify this condition, or you want to specify the YouTube ID?
to do another template for that. Yeah. What you could do is easily create a property, like a checkbox, and then say special layout. And if it's checked, so it's
Yeah, or put in the idea of the idea on the YouTube video.
Yeah, that's actually a standard feature. So, but just to wrap that up, that's true. We didn't talk about that at all. So let's find the custom element, and I can show you how that works. So we have the YouTube special rendering, and actually there is a place in backend where you can put in the YouTube video ID. And just to, is that what you meant?
Yeah, for example, compare this type 3, it's a type 3 classes.
So you want a placeholder which you like? No.
Why? I mean, what for? The question is what for?
Like
Yeah.
inside of the constant so you can globally define.
You so something like a global option. Okay. Configuration dot something, right? Yeah. So for global options, so there's no UI for that. But what you can do is, for instance, you can use all eel helpers in here. Let me just check that. Eel helpers. And there's one which is called configuration.setting, and this can be used to adjust arbitrary settings from the settings YAML. So that means you could just say, oh yeah, I want to define the template path in the settings, for instance. So you could just do something like
Version settings.
yeah, template path equals look $ something configuration setting, and now neos.demo. Sorry, it's more or less readable. I can move the stuff up a bit. Neos demo dot YouTube template path as an example, right? And I mean, we cannot change it in the backend, but you can at least render, or you can at least define it globally. And now when you do that, we get an error. Oh, well, we don't. Ah, yes, we have to move this line to. And we have to add the condition once again. So now it says, oh yeah, it doesn't, oops, did I misspell anything? Oh yeah, yeah. Just to get the example working again. So, right, and then it says, oh, I don't have a template currently. And if I now define the settings, so define Neos demo, YouTube template path, YouTube template path, full bar. I just want to see that it changes, right? And then it shouldn't say no template path. Really?
Yeah.
YouTube, right? I'll copy paste it. Good point. And now it says template foobar code, so it finds the right one. And actually, I'm not sure if we should allow something like settings override in the backend. I mean, we could do that at some point, but actually we don't want to, because for us, these kind of settings should be part of your version control. They should be deployed with your site. At least that's how we tend to think about it in like 90% of the cases. So there might be special cases where that doesn't make sense. But either you want to set that at some point on your node or on your site node or something. So that's, of course, what you could do. Or you would move it in the settings. That's like the normal ways to approach this kind of thing.
There is a way that I used before, but I personally think it's broken and you shouldn't do it. Because then your concept is not correct, but you could always introduce a property to your home page. I mean, create a specific node type for your home page and add any settings that the editor should be able to edit. And because the site node, the home page is available everywhere, you can access those properties and have something globally configured by editors. But yeah, I don't know.
So this is a standard concept how we do global footers and header.
Yeah, exactly. For header, for like if you want a global or a footer menu or these kind of things, they're usually created.
The same principle.
Yeah, but that is content. I mean,
yeah, that's content. That's not config exactly.
Somehow.
But depends on if you configure that.
Yeah, because
yeah.
If, for example,
configure your
Google Analytics key or something.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so
but why would an editor want to?
exactly, why would an editor want to change the Google Analytics key? I mean, that's like yeah, you can do that, but usually it's for us it's more part of, you know, that's something the integrator will probably do, or which is part of deployment. At least that's how we think about that.
Just to play devil's advocate, you might have a big company who once a month creates like a new special landing page for a new like whatever, summer sale or whatever.
Yep.
And you want to track it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can do that, right? I mean, you can always just add a property to the node if that makes sense to your domain, and say, okay, I want to do. In that case, it makes total sense to make the tracking ID configurable, and then using the syntax travel up until you find such a tracking ID, and then use that.
Or just add the Google tag.
Yeah.
So it contains.
Yeah.
But what general settings which are made once?
So okay. So what I would so we still have the example of this afternoon topic what Bastian just mentioned. What I just changed is I changed the condition. I said so based on the date. I didn't do it based on the date. We could use an eel helper here for figuring out the date and then you know, checking if it's afternoon or not. But I just said I wanted to do it based on the request arguments and saying, okay, if it's afternoon, then do it the one way. If not, do it the other way.
It's not what the customer.
Do you really want to wait a few hours until we can test it again? So and
Change your system time.
always back and forth. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it should work.
If we can do it. So and what I did actually is I added that to the condition, just as simple, right? Saying, okay, if it's afternoon, do the one way, and if it's not, do the other. And actually, I think it will break, right? It should break.
Yeah.
And if you don't do anything by that, yeah, then the content is just delivered. So there's a cache problem basically, right? Because I call the normal stage, and I would expect to see the normal YouTube video here. And what I did here is some special config with this add cache, and this is what I'll show now in detail. And I think it makes sense to go back to the concept level once again, because that is quite a complex topic. So it makes sense to see that again from the conceptual side, how caching works. If that's fine for everybody.
Any questions so far?
Yeah.
To the main principles.
Is it somehow useful what we are talking about, or does it help somehow? Okay.
So really important is you're working with prototypes. The prototype is a runner each with another context. The context is mostly the node, and you can define it for each render.
So okay, the content cache. I have some presentation for that. Right. So if content is rendered, we get this TypoScript tree, what we've seen now, right? And the caching is defined based on this tree. And for instance, for every element of this tree, so we can say, is it cached? Like this time, it will cache the whole page. And there are a few caching modes. And the standard one is cached and embed. That means the page is cached, it creates a new cache element. And the menu and the content and the text and the plugin and the image are just part of this single cache element. This says embed. Embed basically means put that in the same cache entry as the top one. It's just one rendered big block of content, essentially. And this just creates this single cache record. It's the page cache. This is what this line does. It says add cache on the page and then it specifies mode cache. That's the basic thing, basically. If for instance I use I have an element which I want to create a separate cache record for, like this plugin, you could again specify it as cached. And what happens then is that the page cache record contains everything except the plugin, and then the plugin gets its own cache record. This is especially useful when you think of a big menu which looks the same on all pages or on many pages, like a big flyout containing of many links, right? And you don't need to build that for every page, but you just need to build it once. So it makes sense that this could be an own cache entry for all pages, for instance. and so that is shared across the different pages you have available.
The important at that point is that you cannot branch out below. So the plugin cache entry can be less, like with the menu example. You have 10 pages, but one menu that is cached. That works, but you cannot have, in the plugin case, that's very dangerous. You cannot have on one page the same plugin with 10 cache entries. That will not work because there's just one cache entry for the page, and that will just open up one cache entry of the plugin, the first one that was rendered. So it will not react to any changes of your arguments or anything anymore.
Yeah. So what you could also do is you can say it's uncached and that this part is always rendered dynamically, right? So that means basically that's like a pretty simple case to say the whole thing should be cached, but this part is user specific and you just want to render it at all times. So that's just the basic principle. And that's basically it. We have these three cache entries. We have cached, creating a new cache breakpoint. We have uncached, which means rendered completely dynamic, and then in between is embedded, which is part of the outer cache element, basically.
And there's one more now.
Yeah, true. First, I would like to focus on uncached. So cache embedded is pretty easy, I think. Embedded is just part of the cache group. Okay, check. So let's focus on the uncached one first. If the plugin is uncached, we need to know some information about what is from the outside, like where variables, what is currently being rendered, for instance. Because let's say on the plugin instance, I can define in the backend, I can say I need some options I can set in the inspector. Right? For instance, let's say we have let's say we have a form plugin, a submission form, an email form, and in the backend I can configure where this email is sent to. So in this information, where this email is sent to is stored on the node of the plugin, right, as properties, just normally, and we need some way to retrieve that in our plugin. So that means we need to know what the TypoScript context is at that point. And this is specified with this context properties here. So that means if something is uncached, I need access to the node, the current one, and the current document node, for an example. So that references variables from the context we've seen in the beginning. And this makes them available inside this cache, inside this uncached entry. That's the main idea about it. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I can also, I think they are online, so I can share links to these presentations. Yeah, sure. Oh. And then we have the cached part, and that's actually, the basic idea of caching is pretty simple. What do we do usually? We have some entry identifier for the cache, a URL. What we usually do is, does this entry identifier exist in the cache? If yes, everything's easy, we deliver all that. If no, we do our expensive calculation, we store, such as rendering the page, and then we store it in the cache. So actually caching is pretty simple, isn't it? So first, focus on, we need to define this entry identifier for the cache. That's the first part we need to think about, because we can do that very fine-grainedly. And this is done if you've set the mode cache, then you can specify the parts of the entry identifier. So meaning, this means that we put the edit preview mode in, which we are in the backend, if we are in the live mode, or if we are in the raw content mode, for instance, and we put in the current node as an example. So that means we get, when we switch the edit preview mode, we get different cache entries, if that makes sense for us. So we get different rendering. If we could also, for instance, if we could say entry identifier equals a static string like menu, this means we always have the same entry identifier throughout the whole system. So that's like the case when we have a big menu, as I've said in the past, and we want to share the cache of the menu across all pages. We can try that if you like. We can, inside our menu, parts, main menu, I'll just try that. I'll say add cache, mode equals cached. And then I say entry identifier equals, and now I can specify the parts of the this menu isn't cached. This is embedded. This is embedded. Okay, so and this would create a static entry. Is it cached? Okay. The document node is in there, or what? Okay, remove it.
Yeah, it's working because you're seeing that the active stage is always the same. Which page you are.
All right, feature exactly. We are just in the top level, right? The second level menu is a different story, right? But when I switched to try me, it still had the old state, right? Because we now have one global cache entry for the whole menu, essentially, and that might make sense at some point. Yeah, that's the fix. And then you could think, okay, caching is done. But actually, there's one thing we didn't think about yet. The content doesn't change yet. And that's actually the part where caching gets difficult, right? It's not the problem of storing things in the cache. It's knowing when to remove things out of the cache again. You know, when content changed, we of course want to remove things from the cache so that things get re-rendered. And that is actually a hard problem. So, as said, the core question is when should the cache actually be flushed? And the idea behind that is that the cache record, I just need to see that. Yeah, the cache record has what we call certain tags to it. So that's just strings which are attached to this cache record. And what we can do in the caching system is we can say, please remove all cache records which have a certain tag. That's a feature the caching system has. And what now happens when content changes, we flush certain tags when content changes, which are the ones listed on the left. So that means if some content changes, the everything tag will be always flushed. So everything which is flagged or tagged with everything will be flushed at every single content change, no matter where this is done. Then we have this node equal underscore UUID of the node, which is flushed or which is triggered all the time when a certain node changes. So that means one node changes, and then this single cache record for this node needs to be flushed. The third one is actually really important, which is descendant of, which says if one of my parents change, if everything below me, how do I explain that?
In a content collection.
Yeah, it's,
for example,
yeah.
If you have a content collection, any node inside this content collection changes, the content collection must be rerouted.
So
because they are embedded.
Yeah, so you basically see whenever anything of my children changes, then I want my cache record to be flushed. And the last one is something saying when a certain node of a certain node type changes, then my cache should be flushed, which you sometimes use for a home page or for menus. Exactly.
For example, you have a menu which is record, and then you add the name of a menu item, for example. The other cache items must also be flashed for every page because you want a new menu item on every page. So the name on every page.
Mm-hmm.
So classical single flow would also be some kind of block overview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So every
Use
time
this,
the
block
block
is-
entry is created.
Exactly. Yeah. So exactly, you also use it for flushing when certain types of content change, and you have these overview pages which display an overview of blog entries, products, whatever, right? Then this is also a useful
So
thing.
this is a really important part. Just always make yourself clear. This is cached. When should it be iterated? Which content is shown, and then you know, okay, this content is shown. So when this content is changed, the cache should be flushed, and then you can access
Yeah, it is somehow thinking like backwards. At least it feels to me sometimes, because usually you like to think of, oh yeah, I would like to, if something changes, I want this and this and this to be flushed. But the problem is, in this case, to make that work performantly, we do have to do it the other way around. We have to, when you create the cache entry, we need to know at which conditions things should be removed again. And this is essentially like the the twist in the head you have to take, which is like a little difficult.
And this is a big difference compared to Type 3, because this is the reason why we don't have the blitzer.
What? Oh, the clear cache in the back end. Yeah.
Because you should never have the fact that you want to clear the cache manually, because the cache is cleared if you change the content. So it's really automatically. You don't edit something in your code or edit content. For example, you edit content, sometimes you need to clear the front-end cache in Type 3. So here the cache is cleared automatically.
Yeah. If it's configured correctly.
If it's configured correctly, this is important.
Yeah.
I was trying to create a new site in the backend, in the actual backend, which seems like, from my opinion, a little buggy.
Type could be, okay. Yeah.
But what was really weird was that the cache, I tried to flush the cache like manually, in like 2 ways of like deleting the whole folder and like doing the normal flow in the cache. And in most cases, the front page still showed my demo page, which was like, it didn't make sense at all.
Okay, we need to test that or see that, I guess. Yeah.
What I basically did, like, I had my demo page running and created a new site in the backend.
Yeah.
You disabled the demo page? No, it just created a new one. That's
Yeah,
the basic part. Because of doing that,
this
your
part
demo page is already getting disabled
I think so, yeah.
automatically.
You kickstarted a new site, or you kickstarted a new site, or you just created a new instance of the demo site?
Kickstarted a new one, right?
Basically, click on the create new site in the backend.
Which is Kickstart. Okay.
There's like someone saying in the discussion forum somewhere, if you did that on a production page, you basically kill the page.
This is
like,
right now. This is really
Yeah.
Although you can't right now. You're not able to create by hand 2 instances of the same site page.
yeah.
So it's not problem. The problem is if you kickstart it, maybe it imports the content from the site XML.
No, but I was trying to create a new page.
I think
We can just try.
let's just try, yeah, because I don't know what happens there.
I mean, like afterwards I thought about it, like, okay, you usually don't do that often.
Yeah.
But
first of this.
so what you did is add new site right here, and then you say create a blank one, and say,
I mean, as I said, I think this is a little weird anyways, because now your demo page is going to be deactivated, and you got to know that deactivating means it's being removed in a different folder, and which is weird here actually to just mention it now. There's deactivated. You've got like a button on the right, which kind of tells you what that actually deactivated and activated, which basically doesn't do anything. And the names are even confusing. But yeah, like I said, like for me it was weird that I couldn't really get rid of the front end cache.
Okay.
But
Like
you just
here,
because it's inactive now. And inactive says yes.
But I clicked it manually, right?
Yeah.
I clicked
Inactive says the package isn't loaded at all.
Yeah,
The class is loaded.
So let's just.
Still didn't work.
So the problem basically is, and there are a few things which are not, some configuration which is not site specific currently, which is especially dimensions. If you work with dimensions and you have languages, so the reason why we did actually this disabling the default site is a hack, or it's a workaround basically, because as you configure dimensions in the settings, this is globally for the whole instance, and that means people who started with the demo site, and the demo site has like 8 languages configured. This means if you run your own site, you usually don't want these 8 languages, but you want your own, start from scratch usually without any. And that's why we deactivated that. But the real root cause problem is actually this. So that's what we would like to fix on the long run, but actually it's not that easy. So that's like the background of why this happens and why this process is so bad basically currently. So.
But again, like your front end doesn't show the view.
No. But it might be a bug you have hit at some point. So it would be interesting if you could try that with the LTS release from last week, because this is what I just have.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm wondering about.
Mine
was
it might be that we had a bug in that
So
area.
if you have your project with you, just
We'll try it.
later and we will check.
Yeah. Okay. So the important thing about the caching is this is, you know, Neos has same defaults on most of these things. That means when you just create simple content, you usually don't need to touch caching. It's really just for more advanced cases where you need it. And we have quite good documentation, which basically explains that, everything which I've told already. That's like I think quite good. And recently, I've never tried it again, so it's the time of, how is the package called, which did this cache? There was no cache visualization. There was some package which I've just seen where you see the caching from whom? I know.
If you search on Neos packages.
Yes. All right. Good point. Packages.
And then search for cache. Media TypoScript cache visualization.
We'll try it. I wanted to try it anyway, so I have no clue what this does, but it looked very interesting. So, oops. Can I jump to GitHub somehow? No? Let's try. GitHub. Right. Okay, cache flushing. And it's enabled by default for development. Okay, let's try that, because that might actually clear up some confusion and help. So let's see what we need to deactivate. Yeah, I need to switch the site again, deactivate the empty site and activate. There's also, you know, I mean, like.
Yeah, that's also a little weird that you have to go here. Actually, this didn't work for me either. I couldn't even like activate it here again. Yeah, I mean, actually, the problem is that with changing packages so much, and the infrastructure can change because packages can do so much. That's part of the problem. I think, and it feels caches. That's why you need to relog in. So that's just not really nice. I think where it really works is when you have like similar-ish websites. So let's say, for instance, in the political party in Denmark, they have like for every Wahlkreis, for every area, they have a different microsite, which all uses pretty similar templates. And there it really works to have multi-sites. But if you have completely different websites on one instance, that's nothing I would recommend at the current point. So
because you're forced to use the single images.
Exactly, because of that, yeah. And also, and exactly, that's what ties it together currently. And that's something we would really like to solve, but as said, it's not that easy. So, admin, password, again, blah. 1 second. Science. So, do you create this one?
Actually, I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
It seems if you disable plugin.
Probably, yeah.
You
didn't deactivate the site.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be, because that was exactly the case when this was still enabled, which doesn't make sense when the package is disabled. I agree, totally. We probably need a hook there, which triggers that. Yeah. Okay, but actually it looks like useful. So now we have, what do we have now? That's cool, because now, yeah, because now you see the different cache entries, and then you also see what, you see also when is a certain thing, like where are we? It's here, content TypoScript cache visualization thing. Oops. And where you can really see, for instance, this is just a single cache entry, right? The whole 3-column, the whole content basically of the website is just a single cache entry. And you see when is the thing changing. So you see, it changes if this node changes, or
the descendant node of this ID.
Yeah, descendant of this ID.
The node itself.
The node itself. A node dynamic tag, I don't know actually. No clue. Christian maybe knows. Maybe something changed there.
Can you go on plugins because there's a cache?
Oh yeah, klar, sure. Plugins. Right. In the photo stream, exactly, it's red, which means it's uncached. And you see the context, so you see what is available inside what you can use inside the plugin. So actually, that's a really cool thing. I think actually at some point pretty close by, maybe for the 3.0, we should also release a meetup package, which just depends on all of these like developer utilities, which help users to understand things.
Yeah, it's really good. Kickstarted did something like that.
Okay, I think we are pretty much. Oh, it ends in 5 minutes. So yeah.
There's this online course. Let's start.
Right. So when you want to learn more, the cool guys of network team in Kiel have done quite some cool things, which is learnneos.com, and this is basically an introduction to TypoScript. And it's not just simple examples, but you can also, I think at some point, you can also try it yourself.
Yeah. But basically explain in there what you explain now.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically the same thing, but right, you can really try things and you can say, so it's like an interactive course. So that is probably a really, really good resource. And then just speaker deck/sco-first, there you find all my presentations. So the TypoScript presentation with the caching is the first one. The TypoScript 2.0, the other one is this one we've seen. So if you want to check the presentations again, they are all online. And as said, the Neos documentation is quite extensive. I mean, it can of course always grow, and we have also for TypoScript, we have lots of how-tos. So you know, where you find common cases like rendering a meta navigation or selecting a page layout, where it's really you have pretty much copy-paste snippets which you can use.
And don't fear to check the prototypes in the code.
Yeah.
And also the news IOs. Start this on GitHub. You can then have this as a reference of the demo page.
Yeah.
Because the news IO would be more actual.
Yeah, it's more recent.
Demo.
So the Neos IO website is also online, where you can check out like how we use Fusion. so actually, and that's maybe the important takeaway. So when we built TypoScript Fusion, we didn't know what people will make of that. It was basically a big toolbox, and we ourselves didn't know like the exact usages in detail. We had some ideas of what should work and what not, but we really would like the community to play around with things and push it to the limits and figure out what works and what doesn't, and you know. And so, because that's also what we see, that at some point somebody has a cool idea, he shares it. So don't be afraid to share what you do and to ask and talk with us and others about what you do, because that really helps to, you know, because I think we're on this journey basically together, like what we build with that. And you can also run it without Neos at all. It also works. You can also use it in flow packages, by the way, for rendering. If you have like complex flow applications where this is useful, you can also do that. Yeah, so.
Well, it turns really out that you can do a lot of stuff with TypoScript or Fusion only. You don't need Fluid templates at all. You can mostly do everything what you want to do. Like if you're going for each loop, for example, in Fluid, always try to do it with Fusion, because you can cache each loop entry, you know? And for example, a good list or example, you have a product list or something, or a grid with products. It's a content collection with 20 items, and each item has its own cache because of the cache configuration. So each item is a prototype, it's a content collection renders as a prototype. So and if once one product is changed, only this one thing in the grid will be recached, and the other caches are still available because only this one thing is invalidated. So you don't have to cache it, recache or rebuild the complete Fluid template. It's a complete for each has all stuff in it. So you can really get a performant website if you use TypoScript or Fusion at all and a lot. A good example of how to do this is a search package. You know.
And also so the Elasticsearch content repository adapter, for instance. What is also important is maybe as a closing remark, what do I want to say? What was one thing? All right, because like if you know Typo3, you are probably accustomed to build lots and lots of plugins, right? So PHP-based things which render on your website at some point. And it turns out that using TypoScript Fusion, using Fusion, you need that a lot less. So the only point where you really need a plugin is actually when you want to interact with the user, when the user submits something, when for these kind of things. But everything which is rendering can be done using Fusion, and can be cached in a good way, and you basically don't need to program anymore in most cases. So we have very complex websites which we just usually build with Fusion, and where you probably write a small eel helper which you need, or where you write a small TypoScript object which helps you, but that's all very little code, and usually you don't need, you know, to create a new plugin, so to speak. So that's just probably the mindset shift if you're used to TypoScript. Yeah. So if you have questions, then we'll just hang around and have fun. I think now it's lunchtime, so thanks for joining.